Okay, so the Constitution of the United States. The first little bit, you might not have had this actually, you five that are looking online, but those of you that are in class, you had a little introductory paragraph that explained about the Constitution. So I'm going to read that to you. The Constitution of the United States, September 17, 1787. 1787 is when? Is it before or after the end of the War of Independence? No, the War of Independence finished in 1783. Okay. So they finished their independence war, they got their independence in 1783, and they made those Articles of Confederation. But those Articles of Confederation were very weak. There was no strong central government. They couldn't defend themselves easily. There was no national army. Every state had their own money. Every state was basically independent. And having 13 individual independent states is not easy for developing the country. So they realized that the Articles of Confederation were very weak, and they needed a stronger set of laws so that they could control the country. So the Constitution of the United States was signed by the framers in Philadelphia on September 17, 1787. Now, the framers, you need to understand, these are the people that signed the Constitution. They were representatives from each of those 13 colonies. So from New York, from New Jersey, from New Hampshire, from Delaware, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Maryland. Okay? Each of those states sent some representatives. And those people that signed the Constitution, sometimes they're called the framers of the Constitution. Sometimes they are called the Founding Fathers. Founding Fathers. F-O-U-N-D-I-N-G. Fathers. So like a foundation. So the father of the foundation. This is the foundation of the country. The base of the country. It was approved by the 9th state as required for final ratification on June 21, 1788. Now, what they said was you need to have 75% of the states to agree. If 75% of the states agree, then the Constitution is for the whole country. And so they sent the Constitution around the country by messenger, on a horse. The Constitution was carried in a little bag on the side of the horse, going from state to state. And it went to each state, and in the legislature, in the government of each state, they read the Constitution, they debate, they argue about the Constitution, and then each state legislature had to vote. Would they accept or not? When the 9th state accepted it, it became the law for the whole country. Americans came to view the Constitution as embodying the reasoned sense of community, in no small part because the public had engaged in full, free, and extensive debate over its merits and flaws before ratifying it. Every legislature was made up of the people. And so the people could go to the legislature, they could hear the debate, they could look at the strength, they could look at the weakness, and then they would vote to accept it or not. And the law was voted on in every one of the 13 colonies. So all the states got to vote. Once ratified, and especially with the addition of the Bill of Rights, now the Bill of Rights are what we're going to look at later this week. You could amend the Constitution, you could edit the Constitution by voting for an amendment. Now some states, they didn't want to agree the Constitution. They said the Constitution was good for giving power to the president, power to the legislature, power to the judiciary, but the Constitution didn't actually give people many rights. And they were really worried about the government becoming a dictator. Remember, they fought against the British because the British tried to take their taxes, tried to make them fight. The British killed people. The British took their land. So they'd seen that if a government has total power, they could become a dictator. They could bully the people. And so they didn't want that to happen again. And so some states, they didn't want to agree to the Constitution until there were some laws to protect the freedom of people. And so they made 10 amendments, 10 extra laws to add at the end of the Constitution. And these 10 amendments were called the Bill of Rights, the rights of the people. These included things like freedom of speech, freedom to protest, freedom of religion. They included the right to own a gun. The Second Amendment gives every American adult the right to own a gun. And that was balancing the power of government, because if the government become too powerful and start to oppress the people, well, all the population would own a gun. And so they could rise up against the government with their guns. So this was to balance the rights of the government with the rights of the people. So we're going to look at the 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights, maybe Thursday and Friday. Okay. So the first paragraph of the Constitution is sometimes called the preamble. Preamble. You might want to write that where it says, "We the people of the United States," yeah? It's called the preamble. 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 Now, preamble means introduction. Okay? So before it goes to Article 1, it gives the preamble, the introduction. And this is really important because later on in the year, you're going to be looking at the preamble, and I'll explain why after we read it. So it says, "We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, and provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our prosperity, do ordain and establish this Constitution of the United States." Now let me ask you a question. Who is making the Constitution? Now look at the first few words. Who is making the Constitution? The people. Okay? It tells you the first three words. We, the people. Okay? Does it say white people? Does it say male? No. It says we, the people. And later on, when the black people are wanting to get their rights, after the Civil War ends and the black people want to end slavery, they want to have the rights to live, some of them might refer to this introduction to the Constitution because it says we the people. It doesn't say we the white people, it says we the people. And some of the black people would say that we are people too. We're not monkeys. We're not lower than people. We are human. You are human, we are human. Different skin color, but both human. And so they use the introduction to the Constitution to argue that they also have the right to freedom and protection. Because the Constitution is made for all the people. And if you go forward to about 1900, the women want the right to vote. So in the beginning, women could not vote. Only men could vote. Only men that own land. Only white men. So not Talo, not Dada, Lala, not Mosquito, he's gone a bit black, building dormitory. Only people like Sithu and Onjomo could vote because they're white and male. Oh, sorry, not Sithu. Only the male white people could vote. So only Onjomo and me could vote in this class. Everybody else is either female or black. And the women actually said, well, we are people too. The Constitution did not say we the white male people. It said we the people, all the people. And so the Constitution later, you will need to compare the Constitution to what the women say when they're asking for the right to vote. Not here? So the introduction to the Constitution is very important because it says we the people of the United States. Why are they making the Constitution? What do they want?
Freedom.
Well, it talks about to have a more perfect union, a union of the 13 colonies. So when it says to make a more perfect union, it means to join the 13 independent colonies together into one country. Now it talks about having justice and domestic tranquility. Tranquility means peace. Okay? Tranquility means peace. So to have justice and peace and to have common defense, that means common means for everybody, so defense for the whole country, and for the general welfare, for the well-being of all people, and for the blessings of liberty. Liberty means freedom. For ourselves and our posterity. What does posterity mean? Yeah, the next generations. Do ordain, do make, do establish, do found this Constitution of the United States of America. So we the people, to have peace and justice and unite together as one country, make this Constitution for the United States of America. Electric went off. Let's hope the Wi-Fi doesn't go off. And you might want to, later on, you might want to go back to the Mayflower Compact and compare some of the idea. In the Mayflower Compact, it said, we combine ourselves together into a civil body politic for better ordering and preservation, to have just and equal laws, and for the general good of the whole colony. Yeah. So when it's saying preservation, it means for our defense. When it's talking about equal and just laws, it's saying to establish justice. When it's saying when it's saying these things, some of these ideas from the Mayflower Compact are used in the introduction to the Constitution of the United States. And you might get an exam question where you have one paragraph from the Mayflower Compact, and you get the preamble to the Constitution, and you might be asked to say which ideas came from the Mayflower Compact. And it might not say which way round. It might say the Mayflower Compact copied from the Constitution. It might say this idea is copied by the Constitution from the Mayflower Compact. You will need to remember the dates. Most important, in the Mayflower Compact is earlier, yes? So which one copy which? Yes. So if you had any answer, you'll have multiple choice, you'll have 4 answers. If any of the answers said the Mayflower Compact copied from the Constitution, you will know that those answers are wrong, because it's the wrong order, it's the wrong sequence. Okay? So you need to get into the habit of comparing 2 sources. The electric's back. In the exam, you get many questions, many questions, where you have 2 paragraphs and you have to compare. You might get something by John Locke, who talks about natural law. And you might get something from the Declaration of Independence. And you have to see the Declaration of Independence take the idea from John Locke. You might get Mayflower Compact and Constitution, and you see that the Constitution take the idea from the Mayflower Compact. You might get something by one of the women's rights complainers, like Stanton. And Stanton uses the ideas from the Constitution to argue that she should have the right to vote. So this is why we will spend a lot of time looking at these documents, because in the exam, you will get parts of these documents, and you will need to compare very carefully which ideas are similar, which ideas are different, how they use each other, and what assumptions are being made. So that was the introduction. Let me just check for a minute. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, so in your homework, I gave you the preamble was written to declare a purpose of the Constitution, which is to make a better union, by promoting fairness and justice, peace, domestic tranquility, safety, common defense and well-being, general welfare, freedom, blessings of liberty for Americans both now and for the future. That is the introduction is giving the reason. The preamble gives the reason why the Constitution is written. Article 1. What is Article 1 about? The legislative branch. Okay? So you don't need to remember all of it, but if you have in your head, Article 1 is about the legislative branch, Article 2 is about the executive branch, and Article 3 is about the judicial branch. What is executive? You remember? Executive is president. You say judge. Salamu. So, the executive is the president, the vice president, and the cabinet. The judicial is the judges. And the legislative branch is Congress. Good. So, Section 1 focuses on the responsibilities and limitation of the legislative branch, the Congress. The responsibility means what they can do, and the limitation means what they cannot do. Okay? So all the way through, there's a balance of power going on. What they can do and what they cannot do. And what they can do, but what other people can do to limit their power. And this, remember, comes out of that time when they'd taken independence from Britain. They were afraid of a government taking too much power, and so they separate the power into three parts: the executive, the legislature, and the judicial. And they all check each other. They all limit each other. It's called checks and balances, or the limitation, or the separation of power. Those three things mean the same thing: checks and balances, the limitations, and the separation of power. These three phrases all come back to this idea of breaking up the power into three separate areas. Okay? Section 1. All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. Vested means placed in. It's a way of saying how power is placed somewhere. So, all legislative power is vested, is placed in Congress, And Congress will include the House of Representatives and the Senate. Now, question 8 of your homework said the two parts of Congress are the something and the something. Sign, what did you say for question number 8? Correct. Question 8, the answer is the Senate and the House of Representatives. Everybody correct? Yeah. Did everybody finish every question? Yeah? Yeah? And you that are listening now, did you all finish every question?
Yes, finished. Yes.
That's 3 of you. How about the other 2? Lasat, sir?
Yes, I already finished, sir.
Good girl. Honeywin? Honey. Honey, honey.
I also finished.
Good girl. Section 2. That was the easy bit. Section 2. The House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every second year by the people of the several states. Who chooses them? Who chooses? Huh? The president? The people. The several states means the 13 colonies. But they don't write the number 13 because they know that it's going to grow. Remember, after the War of Independence, there was that whole Northwest Territory, yeah, which would later become Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. So it includes that area there, and they're already planning that there will be more people coming into Congress later. So it says the several states, meaning all of the states. Question number 9 said, members of the House of Representatives are elected to something year terms. Mosquito, what's your answer?
Number 2.
Or question 9?
No. By roll call and vote.
Hmm?
By roll call and vote.
No. What do you say, Ethan? Well, every second year is copying the answer straight out of the Constitution, but it's not quite grammatically correct. How many year?
For the 2-year term.
Correct. Okay, the number's a little bit strange. Okay, so question number 9 says, members of the House of Representatives are elected to 2-year terms. Because it says in the Constitution, they are chosen every second year. So that means they serve for 2 years. A term means from one election to the next election. Okay? Like a school term is from one holiday to the next holiday. So like from June to October is one term. Here, they get elected every second year, so their term is for 2 years. And the electors in each state shall have qualifications requisite for electors of the most numerous branch of the state legislature. What that means is, if people are allowed to vote for the state legislature, they are also allowed to vote for the federal legislature. So if in New York the people are allowed to vote for the New York government, they can also vote for the federal government in Washington. Okay? Now, that does not say everybody can vote. That allows every state to choose who is allowed to vote. So in some state, they might say only people that own land are allowed to vote. In some states, they might say only people over 21 years old can vote. In other states, it might be 25 years old. Later, some states will allow women to vote and some states will not allow women to vote. But what it's saying is, if they are allowed to vote for the state legislature, then they are also allowed to vote for the federal legislature. Matthew? No person shall be a representative who shall not have attained to the age of 25 years and have been 7 years a citizen of the United States, and who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of that state in which he shall be chosen. How old do you need to be chosen to be a representative? 25. How many years do you need to be a citizen? 7 years. So that means that if one of your little friends from Bucklaw goes to live in America, and after 5 years they become a citizen of America, 7 years after they become a citizen, not 7 years after arriving in America, but 7 years after they get their citizenship, they can stand in the election and people can vote for them to be a representative. You have to be a citizen for 7 years before you can be chosen to be a representative. And you have to be an inhabitant. Inhabitant means to live, no? So you have to be living in the state that you are chosen to represent. Remember, the government is by the people, of the people, for the people. Of the people means of the people of that state. You cannot be living in Maryland and represent Virginia. You have to be living in Virginia if you want to represent Virginia. Representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states which may be included within this union according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding to the whole number of free persons, including those bound to service for a term of years, and excluding the Indians, not taxed, 3/5 of all other persons. So, all white people, they are included. All the Indians, they are not included. The Indians cannot vote. The Indians still have their own laws in their own areas. Okay? So the Native American Indians are not seen as part of the citizens of America. And even today, they have Indian reservations, Indian areas in different states where the police cannot go in. The Indians would have their own police, their own judge, their own law. The only places in Florida where you can gamble in a casino are the Indian areas, because Florida has a rule of no gambling. But there are 7 areas in Florida that still belong to the Native American Indians. And each of those 7 areas has a big casino. So there are different laws in the Indian area and in the rest of the area. So the Indians are not allowed to vote in the election. I think today it has changed. I think today they can vote. I'm not sure, I'm not exactly sure, but I think it has changed. And in this book, where it's in italics, that means that this part of the Constitution has been changed later. It also says 3/5 of all other persons. Remember the compromise about slaves and white people? And they said 5 slave equal 3 white people. So that's the 3/5 compromise. It's there, it's in the Constitution. Sorry. Now, it says the actual enumeration, that means the counting. Enumeration, numeracy. Numeracy is math. So the actual enumeration, the actual counting, shall be made within 3 years after the meeting of Congress for the United States, and within every subsequent term of 10 years, in such manner as they shall by law direct. So, 3 years after they make the Constitution, they will count how many people are in the country. And that is when they will decide how many representatives for each state. The number of representatives allotted to each state is determined by, what do you choose for number 11? Omugate. Okay, not quite right, no. Kind of right, but not quite right. If you said population, that's okay. But it's the number of free people plus 3/5 of the slaves. So it's not only the free people, it's also adding on 3/5 of the slave population. And it says every 10 years, they have to count how many people are in the country again. And if the population in one area increases, they will get more representatives. And if the population in another area decreases, they will get less. Do you remember in Myanmar, maybe 2012 or 2015, there was a census? 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 2015 maybe. There was a counting of all the people in Myanmar. Yeah? That's called a census. CENSUS, census. Counting of the population. And that's what the Constitution is saying there. It's saying every 10 years, the population in the whole country needs to be counted. Because every 10 years, they will adjust, they will increase or decrease the number of representatives for each state. The number of representatives shall not exceed 1 for every 30,000. So, not more than 1 representative for 30,000 people. Each state shall have at least 1 representative. So, if a state like Rhode Island has a very small population, they must have 1 representative. You cannot have a state with 0 representatives. So today, places like Alaska and Wyoming and Montana, North Dakota, they have 1 representative because their population is very small. California has about 52 representatives because the population is very big. Until such enumeration, until we count the population, New Hampshire shall have 3, Massachusetts 8, Rhode Island and Providence shall have 1, Connecticut 5, New York 6, New Jersey 4, Pennsylvania 8, Delaware 1, Maryland 6, Virginia 10, North Carolina 5, South Carolina 5, and Georgia 3. This was for the first Congress, for the first government. This is not very important. You probably will never need to read that bit again. It's just saying, for the first government, before we count the population, this is how many representatives each area can have. And then within 3 years, we will count the population and we will increase or decrease based on the actual population. But this is how they guess. For the very first government, we guess this is how many representatives each colony should have. Not important. Not going to read that bit again. When vacancies happen in the representation from any state, the executive authority thereof shall issue writs of election to fill such vacancy. A writ of election means an order to have a new election. So, if one of the representatives dies, then the executive, the governor of the state, will give an order to have a new election and to choose somebody. The House of Representatives shall choose their Speaker and other officers, and shall have the sole power of impeachment. Who chooses the Speaker of the House? The House of Representatives. Okay, so the House of Representatives is the lower house. When the House meet together, one of the first things they do when they meet together is they have a vote for who shall be the Speaker of the House. Okay? Similar in Myanmar. In Myanmar, they vote for 3 vice presidents, and then they choose a president, and then they vote for a speaker. The speaker is like the chairman. So every time they have a meeting, there is somebody at the front who is in charge. Somebody who chooses who will speak. Somebody who chooses when they will vote. This is called the Speaker of the House. Okay? So if you go and watch Myanmar government, they're meeting this week, I think. So if you watch the Myanmar government, on the stage at the front, there will be a chair that's higher up. This is the Speaker of the lower house. He is the chairman of the meeting. He is choosing which people will speak and which laws they will vote on. Okay? So, question number 12. How is the Speaker of the House chosen? By a vote of the representatives. And it also says that they shall have the sole power of impeachment. What is impeachment? Yeah, you can remove from office. So only the House of Representatives can vote to remove the president from office. You'll see later that after the House of Representatives votes to remove the president from office, the Senate will listen to the evidence in favor and against, like a jury, like a trial, like a court. And then the Senate will vote to finalize removing the president or to cancel removing the president. So the House of Representatives are the only ones that can start the process to impeach, to remove the president. The Senate is the only one that can finalize the process. So if the House of Representatives does not start, the Senate can never finalize. They can never listen to the evidence in favor or against. It's a stupid idea. That means, like Donald Trump, he was impeached in January. The House of Representatives is controlled by the Democrats. Donald Trump is a Republican. In the Senate, most of them are Republican. So the Democrats in the House of Representatives voted to impeach the president. They had a 3-day trial in the Senate. The Senate voted not to listen to any witness. They voted not to allow the witnesses to speak. So they couldn't ask any questions to the witnesses. They voted not to watch the videos, not to listen to the phone calls. Why? Because they're Republican. They wanted to say he's not guilty. It would be like Omugay being accused of a crime and saying, okay, put me on trial, and my jury will be Talo, Kudoso, Mr. Bean, Sithu, and Onjomo. This will be the jury that decide if I'm guilty or not. You choose your friends to be the jury. That is how the American system works. Why? Because of the Constitution. Okay. Why did it happen like that in January with Donald Trump? Because the Constitution said that is how it must happen. Now, Section 3. This is going to be about the Senate. The Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state, chosen by the legislature thereof for 6 years, and each senator shall have 1 vote. So every state can send how many people? 2. Remember, this was the compromise. The small states wanted equal representation. The big states thought they should have more members. So in the lower house, in the House of Representatives, it is proportional according to the population. And in the upper house, in the Senate, it is equal. Every state has the same number of people. This was the compromise between the big state and the small state. Yeah? So, if you're looking at question 14, the number of senators is 2 per state. Question 13, Sithu. Yes, 6 years. Who chooses the senators? Come again? No. Not the people. President? No. Huh? The legislature. Yes. So the legislature in New York would choose 2 senators to go to the federal government. The legislature in Delaware, they choose their 2 senators. The legislature in each state would choose 2 people to go and be the senator for that state. Do you think that's a good idea or not? Who might they choose? People they can control. Yeah. Or their friends, or their family. Or rich people that give them a donation. You know, imagine, I don't know, who's a boss in here? Mosquito, the boss man here. Mosquito is very rich. And so he gives a big donation to the legislature in Delaware where he lives. And then the legislature in Delaware think, Mosquito, you can be our senator. And that's what used to happen. Rich people, businessmen, used to buy a seat in Congress by giving large donations to the state legislature. What do you notice about chosen by the legislature thereof? Look at the book. What do you see? Look at the text. It's in italic. Okay? If you've got the book here, it's in italics. What does in italic mean? Change later. Okay? One of the amendments to the Constitution changed this section. One of the amendments of the Constitution gave the right to the people to vote for the senators. I think it was like the 12th Amendment, something like about the 12th Amendment. We'll look at it later. But they realized that this was making corruption, that rich people were buying their seats, and so later they changed the Constitution to make it an election. But in the beginning, the founding fathers, the people that wrote the Constitution, thought that most people were not well educated, a little bit stupid. So they were afraid to give too much power to the people because they thought the people might make bad decisions. And so they limited democracy. They limited the will of the people by saying the state legislature will have the power to choose the senator. And when we look a little bit further on in the Constitution, you'll see that anything about tax, any law about tax, cannot start in the Senate. Taxation law must come from the House of Representatives. Why? Because the House of Representatives are chosen by the people. And the tax is taken from the people. So they said it was not fair for the senators to make a law about tax when the people could not vote for the senator. Because that would be like the King of England taking the tax from the American people when the American people could not vote for the King of England. So when they made the Constitution, they said only the House of Representatives would be allowed to start the taxation law. The Senate would approve, both the representatives and the Senate, they would both need to approve, but the law could only start in the House of Representatives because only the House of Representatives were chosen by the people. Okay? So it links back to that history about independence, about the stamp tax, about the tea tax. Because of that, they made the Constitution like this. And the more you understand about the history, the more you'll understand about the Constitution. A lot of the ideas in the Constitution are taken because of the history. Immediately after they shall be assembled, in consequence of the first election, they shall be divided as equally as may be into 3 classes. The seats of the senators of the first class shall be vacated at the expiration of the 2nd year, of the second class at the expiration of the 4th year, and of the third class at the expiration of the 6th year, so that 1/3 may be chosen every 2nd year. Nathia? We will divide the senators into 3 groups. Okay. How long do the senators serve for? Senators are chosen for 6 years. Okay. Representatives, 2 years. Senators, 6 years. But they do not want to change all of the senators at the same time. Because there is election every 2 years for the House of Representatives, they can also vote for 1/3 of the senators. Okay? So we've got 11 people here, so we might say, okay, you are the first senators, nah? After 2 years, Mosquito, Athane, Thimpile, and Sign, after 2 years, you will need to fight the election again. Just you 4. And then after 2 more years, so after 4 years, Nanshui, Omage, Anjomo, and Situ, you will be fighting your election again. And then 2 years later, so after 6 years, Talo, Kudo, Bin, you will be fighting the election. And then 2 years later, we're back to these 4, who have now had 6 years. And then 2 years later, we're back to these 4, who have now had their 6 years. And then 2 years later, we're back to these, who have had their 6 years. And it means that they always have experience in the Senate. If they change the whole of the Senate at the same time, they might lose all of their experience. So they divide the Senate into 3 groups, and every 2 years, 1 group is chosen again. So at the same time as the election for the House of Representatives, 1/3 of the Senate is being chosen. In the very beginning, it's not possible because you've got everybody is new. So that's why they say at the very beginning, 1/3 of you will have to fight again after 2 years. And then after 4 years, you will go. And then after that, everybody's for 6 years, but we're choosing you in groups, not all of you at the same time. That yeah? Yeah? How are we doing? Let's go a little bit more. If vacancies happen by resignation or otherwise, by somebody resigning or dying or getting sick, if there's a vacancy, during the recess of the legislature of any state, the executive thereof may make temporary appointments until the next meeting of the legislature, which shall then fill the vacancies. So, if it's a holiday time, the governor of the state can choose a new senator to go there. And if it's not a holiday time, then the legislature can vote for a new senator. And that's changed, because now it's chosen by the people. But the governor of the state can still choose a temporary senator. They won't have a special election. So, for example, Andrew Modai, he's a senator from New York, and he died. The governor of New York can choose somebody to replace him. No person shall be a senator who shall not have attained to the age of 30 years, and been 9 years a citizen of the United States, and who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of that state for which he shall be chosen. How old do you need to be? Bean? Bean? You're not Mr. Bean, are you? Are you Mr. Bean? Are you Mrs. Bean? Yeah. Mr. Bean? 30 years old, okay. How old did you need to be a representative? No. Listen to the question. How old did you need to be a representative? 25. And to be a senator? 30. Now, what they're trying to show is that the senator is a higher position. Okay? Representatives are only chosen for 2 years. They are the lower house, they are the lower position. So there can be a lower age, only 25-year-old. But the senator is a higher position, and they're there for 6 years, so they want more responsibility. So they say to be a senator, you must be 30 years old. But to be a representative, you only need to be 25 years old. This is question 15 from your homework, by the way. And Mr. Bean, how many years do you need to be a citizen to be a senator? 9. How about to be a representative? Huh? To be a representative? 7. Okay. So a representative, 25 years old, 7 years a citizen. To be a senator, 30 years old and 9 years a citizen. So senator is higher than representative. So the age is higher and the citizenship is higher. Do you think the president will be higher or lower? Higher again, okay. Higher position, older, more strict on the citizenship. Again, higher position will be older and more years, okay. And again, they must live in the state that they have been chosen for. The Vice President of the United States shall be the President of the Senate, but shall have no vote unless they be equally divided. Who is the Chairman of the Senate? Who is the leader of the Senate? The Vice President. But does the Vice President vote? No. Will you have an even or an odd number of senators? How many senators come from each state? 2. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Yeah. So will there be an even or an odd number? Even. Yeah? Because there are 2 from every state, there will always be an even number. So, when there were 13 colonies, how many senators were there? 26. Now, if 13 vote yes and 13 vote no, what can you do? It's a draw. It's equal, yes? So what happens then? Then the Vice President is allowed to vote. The Vice President is the leader of the Senate, and he is only allowed to vote if the vote is tied, if it is a draw. Okay? Now, in the House of Representatives, there's always an odd number. At the moment, I think it's about 435, something like that. But they always make it an odd number in the House of Representatives. So you're not going to get a draw unless somebody refuses to vote. But in the Senate, because there's always going to be an even number, because every state sends 2 people, there is a higher chance that the vote can be tied. So the Constitution had to think, how can we break the tie? So the Constitution gives the Vice President the right to vote if the vote is tied. That is question number 16. Who is the President of the Senate? The Vice President. When can he vote? When the vote is tied. The Senate shall choose their other officers and also a President pro tempore in the absence of the Vice President or when he shall exercise the office of the President of the United States. Now, is the Vice President free to go to the Senate every day? No. He's got many other duties, yeah? He is the Vice President of the United States, He's got a lot of duties. He has to go to other countries. He's got many jobs that he has to do. So they have to choose a chairman who can control the Senate when the vice president is not there. And that job is called the president pro tempore. Pro tempore means temporary, not permanent, temporary president. And sometimes, if the president of the United States dies, who will become the president? Vice president. And if the vice president becomes the president, is there a vice president anymore? No. So, if the president dies and the vice president becomes the president of America, or if he is busy in other meeting, or he is visiting other country, then the president pro tempore is the chairman of the Senate. When the vice president is free, when he is there, he takes the position. But when he is not there, the president pro tempore takes the position. The Senate shall have the sole power to try all impeachments. To try means to listen to the evidence in favor or against. Remember, it said at the end of section 2, the House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeachment. A little bit confusing with the wording, but what it means is the House of Representatives are the only people allowed to vote to start the impeachment. And the Senate is the only group of people allowed to be the court, to listen to both sides, and to vote guilty or not guilty. When sitting for that purpose, there shall be an oath or affirmation. When the President of the United States is tried, the Chief Justice shall preside. So the Chief Justice means the Chief Judge. From the Supreme Court, it comes up in Article 3. When the President of the United States is on trial, the Chief Justice will be the person presiding, the chairman. Now, the impeachment is not only for the President. Impeachment is for the President, for the Vice President, for the Cabinet, that means the Secretary of State, for education, for health, for other things, or for the judges. Okay? Anybody chosen to be in the executive branch, or anybody chosen to be in the judicial branch, can be impeached, can be removed if they do something illegal, if they do something that is wrong. Okay? Now, normally, when we're looking at it in GED, normally we will talk about the president being impeached. And there's 3 examples in history of the president being impeached. But it is not only the president, it could be the vice president or cabinet or the judges. No person shall be convicted without the concurrence. What does concurrence mean? Agree. Concur means to agree. I concur with you. I agree with you. So without the agreement of 2/3 of the members present. So it's not half. You must have 2/3 of the people to agree. So they make it very difficult to impeach, because they think if the other party control the Senate, they might not like the president, and so just try to remove, because they just don't like him. And so they said 2/3 needs to agree. So basically, some people from both parties normally will need to agree. It's very unlikely that either party, Democrat or Republican or Whig in the past, would have 2/3 of the Senate. Normally, it's shared about 60-40. Okay? So normally you need both sides to agree. Judgment in case of impeachment shall not extend further than the removal from office and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of trust, honor, profit under the United States. So, the only punishment that they can give is to remove from office. They cannot ask for money. They cannot put in prison. They cannot kill. They cannot do anything that a normal court can do. Normally, you get fined or imprisoned or executed. No. Impeachment, the only punishment they can give is to remove them from the office, and then they will not be allowed to take an office again in the future. So if you've been impeached and removed, you cannot be elected again in the future. You are banned for life. But the party convicted shall nevertheless be liable and subject to indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment according to the law. That means after you've been impeached, the police can arrest you. And then you would go to a court, and then you can be put on trial if you did something illegal. So for example, if Donald Trump shoots somebody, Congress can remove him. They can impeach him. After he is impeached, then the police can arrest him, indict him, arrest him, and take to court and put on trial. But they cannot do that before he's impeached. And the impeachment cannot send to prison. So it's separate. Impeachment is only about removing from office. It's not about any other punishment. Section 4. The times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof, but the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations except to the places of choosing senators. So this says the election law is controlled by every state. Okay? Who can vote, where they can vote, what time they can vote, this is chosen by the state, not by the federal government. One place might say in the church, another place might say in the school, another place might say only for 1 hour per day, another place might say for 10 hours per day. It's chosen by each individual state. Congress shall assemble at least once in every year, and such meeting shall be on the first Monday in December, unless they by law appoint a different day. How often must the Congress meet? Question number 17. Hello. Yeah. Cannot be less than 1 time per year. Normally they meet 5 times per week, apart from holidays. But even in a war, even in coronavirus, they must meet at least 1 time per year. Otherwise they're breaking the law. That bit about the first Monday in December, that's been changed. It's now January. They've changed it. Each house shall be the judge of the elections, returns and qualifications of its own members, and a majority of each shall constitute a quorum to do business, but a smaller number may adjourn from day to day and may be authorized to compel the attendance of absent members in such manner and under such penalties that each house may provide. As long as there is a majority there, they can meet. If people refuse to come, so some people might not want to vote. They might know that if they go and vote, they will lose the vote. So they might pretend to be ill. They might pretend to be busy. They might refuse to come. Well, it says they can compel them. They can force them to come. Maybe they will send the police to bring them to the Congress if they refuse to come. So if you are elected, you have a duty to go. Each house makes their own rules. Each house punishes its members for bad behavior. And if 2/3 agree, they can expel, they can throw out a member. So if they break the law, if they do something bad, if they're corrupt, if they're taking money, if 2/3 of the house agree, they can be thrown out. Each house shall keep a journal of its proceedings. That means they keep a book. They keep a record of what they talk about. They keep a record of who vote. They keep a record of what law is passed. The House of Representatives has 1 record, and the Senate has 1 record. And from time to time, they publish the same, excepting such parts as may in their judgment require secrecy. So they need to publish the record unless it's something about defense. If there's something secret in there, then they can take out that little bit, but they must open it up to the people. Remember, it is a government of the people, so they cannot hide. And the yeas and the nays mean yes and no. So when they're voting for a law, yay, we agree, nay, disagree. Of the members of each house shall be written down. So they can write them down. And neither house during Congress shall, without the consent of the other, adjourn for more than 3 days. So they can't run away. Now imagine a law is about to be voted on. They cannot run away and refuse to vote. They must be present. Let's do section 6 and then we'll take a break. Okay? Section 6. The senators and representatives shall receive a compensation for their services to be ascertained by law and paid out of the Treasury of the United States. What does compensation mean? Basically means money, yes. So, question number 18. Are they paid? Yes, they are paid. And the money is paid from the treasury, from the tax. So the treasury will collect the tax from the people, and some of that tax is used to pay the senators and the representatives for doing their work. They shall, in all cases except treason, felony, and breach of the peace, be privileged from arrest during their attendance at the session of their representative houses and in going to and returning from the same. So they're not allowed to be arrested, except for treason. Treason means betraying your country, working with another country. So basically, when they are in Congress, the police cannot arrest them. When they are going to Congress, coming back from Congress, unless their crime is very, very, very big, the police cannot arrest them. And for any speech or debate in either house, they should not be questioned in any other place. So they can say what they like. When they are in Congress, they can say anything that they like. They have complete freedom to speak. They cannot be arrested. They cannot be questioned about what they said. They have complete freedom to speak. No senator or representative shall, during the time for which he has been elected, be appointed to any civil office under the authority of the United States which shall have been created, or the emoluments whereof shall have been increased during such time. And no person holding any office under the United States shall be a member of either house during his continuance in office. So, if you are the president, you cannot be part of Congress. If you are the vice president, you cannot be part of the Congress. If you are a general or an officer in the army, you cannot be part of the Congress. If you were an officer before and you are retired, then you can be in Congress. But if you are still being paid by the government, you cannot be part of the Congress. If you're a judge, if you're a cabinet secretary, if you are in any position that is paid by the government, you cannot also be a member of the government, because then you would be choosing yourself. You might be paying yourself. You might be voting for yourself to get more money. There would be a conflict of interest. Not like the Myanmar Parliament, where 25% is reserved for the Tatmadaw. Okay? This says very clearly, Section 6, Article 1 of the Constitution says very clearly, you cannot have two jobs if you are paid by the government. So if you are a member of the government, you cannot have any other job paid for by the government. You can be a businessman. You can be a journalist, a newspaper reporter, because that's not paid by the government. But you cannot have a job that is paid for by the government or chosen by the government if you are a part of the government. It's about separating the power. Okay? Let's take a 10-minute break.